Hi guys, my name is Moss or Ryan, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make a drum and bass type beat in the style of my new song, Can't Take It. Let's get right into it. Alright, first things first, we're going to start with a chord progression. This is written in 134 BPM F minor. You can see we just kind of made some basic chords here. Simple progression, so we have an F, a G, and a D. Added a little bit of top line to the chords, and just follow with some little bits of bass notes here. So I'll let you hear how this sounds. The chords are going to be the bass for your melody, so you want to make these as good as you can, and give them some rhythm. The little bit of top line helps as well with that, but you don't want to overdo it. You want to leave room for, a vocalist with these styles and other instruments that you might want to add throughout the song. And the effects on this is just a basic delay, ping pong and set the pan all the way to the left, and the volume right to this little knob here, that fifth knob. Just a little bit of an EQ, nothing too crazy. Boosting a little bit of the lows, and a little bit of the highs, but not too much crazy. And this all feeds into a bus. All melodies will feed into this bus all the way down on 37. This bus does have a low cutoff filter. This allows me to automate it. So sections where I want room for drums, you're going to want to make room in the low end. That's really important. For that kick or the bass, 808, whatever you're using, you want to keep room in that low end. So all these melodies are going to feed into this EQ bus, and then I'll automate it throughout the song to bring some of the low end from the melodies back in when the drums aren't in. But you don't want them going at the same time, or it's going to get muddy. It's not going to sound good. Also, for those curious, the preset I use for this is the FM Piano 3 in Zenology. Okay, moving on to the next layer. I like usually adding a layer of chords, so it's going to be just the same pattern. You don't always have to keep the top line. I did choose to get rid of the bass notes because it's going to add more frequencies which can interact with other frequencies. Not a hard rule to follow, but a good rule of thumb in general. But play to your ear. And the only difference for this layer is we did move the entire chord progression up an octave, along with removing that bass line at the bottom. And as you can see, this one only comes in, I believe, during the bridge of the song, just a certain section. To add variation is we'll have another layer come in during a different section. And this is what it sounds like. For anyone curious, this is the nylon guitar plugin in Zenology. The effects I use for this is the same delay preset I used for the other one. You set the delay to ping pong, pan all the way to the left. It doesn't mean it's panning all the way to the left. You just do that with ping, since it's going to automatically go left to right anyways. Volume knob right here. I also added a little bit of an EQ. This one does cut the lows, but it also cuts a little bit of the low mids as well. That feeds into that same bus. Okay, and for the other layer I added, it was another one from Zenology. This is going to be the ring/mod. I believe it's a synth preset in Zenology. And same thing, just copy the chords, we move them an octave up, and we cut the bass line from this as well. And you can see it kind of fills it out with a bit of an ambience. A pro tip for layering is you usually don't want them in the same frequency band. So if you've got more of a low end melody as your main chords, you want your layer to maybe sit an octave, maybe even 2 up, in general. But yeah, this kind of just fills out the sound spectrum for us, and kind of works with the main chords to bring a more robust sound. I'll play these together as well. It is subtle but noticeable. Okay, and then the effects for our ambient layer, we used a Fruity Delay 3. This is a preset I created. We also used a Fruity Convolver. For this, I just hit the knob 2 or 3 times until it says white noise, pink or white. And then you click this little knob here, it'll shrink it like that. It just adds a bit of ambience and fluff, I guess, to it. And I kept the mix knob all the way up on those. The last thing I added was a bit of EQ on the high end. I did kind of want it to fill out more of the highs. Now that we have the chords out the way, the next thing we're going to want to add is a bit of melody, or a counter melody, to work with the chords. And we will add multiple of these to go in and out throughout the song, just to add variation. And the first one of these is an ARP melody I created in Serum. What we did is we actually took the original chords, copied and pasted them into the serum layer. And if you actually, I'm not going to do it because I don't want to ruin it here. But if you just highlight all of these and hit Alt-A on your keyboard, it'll randomly generate you an arpeggio pattern like this with whatever sound you'd like. So for this one, we used Beauty Pluck from the Shinju Serum Bank 3. What it sounds like. And that's just another fun way to layer, but also add more so another melody kind of going on throughout it that's going to match the chords, so you won't have any worries about it not fitting in. And then the effects on the ARP melody we created, these are very basic. I just put a pancake plugin, so this is just going to automate the pan left to right. I put the mix knob around 50%. Not even an EQ, it'll get EQ'd with the bus. All right, and then the next thing we're going to want to add is another counter melody. This one's going to have a bit more direction. But this one is the one I use in verses, I believe. I do usually like separating the chorus and verse melodies, so they're each separate. It adds more variation to this. You don't have to do that, though. Not a strict rule by any means. Okay, and for this one, we use the alto sax plugin in Xenology. This is what it sounds like. For the effects, I just used the Fruity Reverb 2 plugin. I used the Cathedral preset, and then I didn't change any of these knobs. Although I would recommend bumping the low cut up to maybe 140 anytime you use this. You'll get a lot of low end reverb, which can then mix with the muddiness we mentioned earlier. This mixed with a delay, same delay preset I use for all these, and a little bit of pancake, only at a quarter of the mix about. And this allows it to automatically pan, right? Just a bit. It's subtle because the mix knob's so low, but enough. And that also feeds into that bus. Okay, and lastly, for our chorus melody, I did actually do layered melodies. So we have two of the identical pattern here, Nexus 1 and Nexus 2. And I'll show you each of them. Okay, so for this pattern, I used the lead named Commercial Voice 1 in Nexus 4. This is what that sounds like. And the effects on this, we do have a ton. First things first, we have our same delay preset we've been using for all of these. I also used Portal. I really like this Glaciers preset. I believe it comes default with Portal. I set the dry wet at 20% and mix knob at full. A convolver, the same convolver thing I showed earlier. This mix knob's at about a quarter or a third. Destructor, I believe it's the lo-fi preset in Destructor. This just adds a bit of bit crushing. I set both of these knobs to about around 30, and then the Destructor to the full. Then we added an EQ. This is just the radio preset. I like the way it sounds, but we only did a quarter mix because we don't want to cut too much. And I did want to fill out the left and right a little bit, so we did use that pancake plugin again, although this time with a different preset. Then an EQ just to cut the lows. This is actually unnecessary because it feeds into that bus. And for the second layer that we use for the main melody, we're using Nexus 4 again. This time we're using the brass section brass preset. This is what that sounds like. And then the effects on the brass preset, we just used the reverb, that Cathedral reverb again that I really like. I just kept all the knobs the same. And then an EQ, same thing. I didn't really need to cut this low end here, but I did want to cut the high end to make room for that other melody that I laid with the same pattern. And this is how the two main melodies sound together. And then we have one last main melody to go through. I use this, I believe, in build-ups and the first half of the call and response. So it also is going to have two different tracks. And this call and response alternates every bar. This is what the call sounds like. For this one, I use Diva 2. Preset is the Pump Lead. Effects on this is more of that Cathedral reverb preset, more Portal. Glaciers, again, a pretty delay 2 preset that I've been using at 50%. The Pancake plugin on, I believe this is the rhythm preset, at a mix of 25%. And then for the alternating response every bar, this is what it sounds like. And the preset I used for this was the Candy Bell synth preset. The effects I used on this were pretty basic, just a fruity delay 2 with those same settings that I've been using. And together, the call and response sounds like this. Now let's get into the drums. We have 2 sections of this song. We have a drum and bass section, which is going to be the main thing that plays throughout the whole thing. I believe there's 3 hooks in it. And then we do have a section where we actually do bring in some trap drums here. Let's start with the drum and bass. So first is our bass line. This is going to follow that original chord progression we created. And we're just going to add some rhythm and bounce. So this is what it sounds like. For this one, I used Omnisphere. I used the Growler Moog bass. The effects on this, there's some fruity fast distortion. This will make it a little bit fuzzy. This is the default preset, and I put the mix to around 25-30%. And then a bit of an EQ. Just boost the lows a little bit. Mids go down a little bit, and the highs down. But you don't want to cut too much of those mids or highs, because they do sometimes fill out. But it's definitely going to be low and dominant. Okay, now for the drums. For these, I really like using samples. Especially with drum and bass, it's hard to get really good sounding drum and bass drums just from sample packs and one shots. Possible, but if you want to do it, what I think is the best way, especially if you're just starting out, it's going to be to grab some of these sample packs, throw in the drum loops, make a couple chops. You don't have to do anything, but just enough to add variation. This is what that one sounds like. For the effects on this, I just did an EQ. So very basic. Boosted the highs a little bit because the hi-hats weren't shining out too much through. So we gave that a little boost. And the mid, I believe this is right around where the snare hits. We gave that a little boost. You could add something like reverb. It wouldn't hurt. You just don't want to overdo it. But again, that's all stylist. And then in a lot of these drum and bass songs, I like actually adding 2 drum loops stacked on top of each other, as long as they're not clashing. For this one, I opted to use more of a hi-hat loop. There's some high-end percussion in there too, I think. But we just throw this on top to kind of fill out the sound a bit. What that sounds like. Okay, and the effects I added on this one was actually a reverb. I used the drum room preset on this, a little bit of low cut. And then Portal, I use that Glaciers preset. This thing works on everything. I believe the mix is also around 20 or 50. And then I'll briefly play both patterns on top of each other so you can hear what I mean. Feels a bit more full like this. And then the last drum loop I do use in this, I believe I only use in the bridge and the intro. This is different to the other ones, and this is just kind of to build up tension. The volume is automated on this one, so it does kind of swoop in and build up before switching to the main drum pattern. I believe this is an underscores loop, what that sounds like. And then you can hear when the other drums come in. It does kind of give it a nice little switch. And for that mix, there's nothing much, just a bit of an EQ on it. I use the radio filter. And that's actually automated with kind of the build up, so it doesn't stay at 100% mix like it said. There is one other part of the drums I almost forgot. This does layer in with the drum and bass. And this is just a little vocal chant I added just as the verse comes in. It needs a Should have done that. Bag thrown. Okay, and the mix on this is nothing crazy. We did add a delay though at quarter mix and a pancake as well at quarter mix. Lastly, let's get into the trap section of the song. Melodies are the same, but we do use these trap drums instead. So first I start out with an alternating 808 pattern. These are actually two different 808s. You can see here, I'll play them together. I do quite like using the call and response method with 808s because it does add a little bit of variation. And this is also a similar pattern to the bass line we had earlier. And the mix on the 808s is just bare bones, but I do add a soft clipper to the master, which does help with the sound. And one other pro tip I do use in one of these is the boost knob. You go and click on your 808 here, click this little knob looking thing right here. We have a little boost knob here. Just move this around. See, you can make it really excessive. Like if I do this, okay, you can't actually hear. It's not deep frying. But it just changes how punchy it is in the beginning. It changes the waveform. You want something that has more of an impact when it comes in, kind of like a kick would. With your 808, the boost knob can help. It also helps if the 808's a bit quiet and you don't want to keep turning up the knobs. And I believe most of these drums are from either the Forever and Taylor Morgan kit or the Rio Levia kit. Oh yeah, one thing I didn't mention with the 808, and similar to the bass line, you do want this to follow the root note of your chord. And this is our clap pattern. The only thing not standard about this is you have it on all of these middle points between the 1 and the 2, the 2 and the 3. But we did skip that second one. And we do have a bit of just a little counter clap that comes in once every 4 bars. This is what that sounds like. And for this clap, we actually didn't add any effects, which I don't really do anymore. But when I made this, I didn't use effects on a lot of my drums. One thing I would do now in most of my claps is I'll use the Fruity Reverb plugin with the drum room preset, add a little bit of low cut around usually 120, 140. Then I'll either move down the mix knob or the wet knob so it's not obnoxious. Also, some EQing can help if it's not boosted a lot. Sometimes I'll layer claps if I want 2 different sound profiles to kind of layer together, but this one is just bone dry. And then we have our hi-hat pattern, kind of a hi-hat god. We'll juice these ones up. And the mix on the hi-hats, I actually do mix this is a bit of reverb. Don't do any low cut on this, but then I do usually adjust the wet knob between usually 5 and 15%. And that is also on the drum room. You get a little bit of boost in the EQ for the high end, just to make them stand out a little bit. And we have a chant that comes in that almost plays the role of a counter snare, but it doesn't sound like one. Okay, mix on the chant is almost bone dry. We do have a pancake though, just to kind of fill out the drums a little bit more left to right. I believe that's on about 60% mix. And then next we have our first of 2 different counter snares that we have in the trap section. This one's very basic. This is what that sounds like. Mix on this one is also bone dry. And here is our other counter snare. This one actually has a bit of a snare roll. This is what that sounds like. And only difference with this one in terms of effects is we did use the pancake plugin just to give it a little bit of left to right on full mix. All right, and these are what the drums sound like all together. Lastly is the various automations we do in here. There's not a ton, but there is a lot of volume automation for build-ups. Usually the drums for these, but also some of the melodies. We do ramp up the volume into the chorus from the intro or from the bridge. We do also have that radio effect I mentioned earlier. That's on the drums during the build-up, so that kind of drops and automates back in. Okay, then we throw it all together, and this is what it sounds like. keep the self promo short, but if you are interested in listening to the track, it is out on most platforms, SoundCloud, and there's also a music video up on YouTube. I'll put all the links in the description if you're interested. Lastly, hopefully you found something useful from this tutorial. Hopefully it was interesting. Hopefully you know how to make a drum and bass beat now. But that's it. Hope you guys all have a great rest of your day. I'm
feeling alright, I'm feeling okay. Take my hand as we walk through the gates. I got too much on my hand every single time I try.